Hey everybody, welcome to another Dark Souls 3 video. I hope you guys are having a good day, night, morning, evening. And today, I wanted to see if I could beat Dark Souls 3 by giving everybody the big bonk. Now what does that mean exactly? Well, that means during this run, I can only use clubs and great hammers. It should be a lot of fun. And after creating this lovely character, who I fittingly named the Bonkinator, our run begins. And I immediately began to grab some resources and do a little tomfoolery on the side. While fighting this ice lizard, I found out that the club is very good at staggering enemies. After bonking this lizard a few times for a good amount of souls, it was time to face Gundyr. We let out a war cry, which increases our damage, and then the fight begins, and I immediately get punched in the head. After giving Gundyr a few good bonks, we get him to phase 2. And a few minutes later, the Bonkinator claims her first victim. We then head over to Firelink Shrine, where we steal an Estus Shard and the Silver Serpent Ring from them, which increases the amount of souls I get per kill. We then open these double doors and we travel over to the High Wall of Lothric. Before taking on Vort, I decided to do a little bit of shopping, so we grabbed some gold pine resin. We grab another Estus Shard, and we don't explode this time, which is pretty awesome. Then we grab a few embers, along with a ring of sacrifice, and then it was time to face Boreal Valley Vort. And we were actually doing a pretty good amount of damage. We soon get Vort down to phase 2, and during his phase transition, I'm able to get 1 or 2 good hits off. Unfortunately though, because the heavy attack of the club is kind of wonky, we aren't able to get the big stagger off on Vort. But thankfully, a few bonks later, and Vort falls. We then get abducted by these wannabe aliens, and soon we arrive at the undead settlement. While we're here, we talk to Yoel of Londor, who gives us a few free levels back at Firelink Shrine, and then he disappears, just like me when it's time for math class. We grab an Estus Shard and then an Ember, and then a little later down the line, I grab Flynn's Ring, which increases our attack power when our equip load is low, and then I grab the Chloranthy Ring, which increases our stamina recovery speed. Then it was time to turn the Cursed Rotten Greatwood to some firewood. And thankfully, the club deals a lot of damage, so a lot of the weak points on the tree were, well, pretty weak. We were actually doing pretty well, but I got greedy and I didn't heal, and that caused a big ass rock to fall on my head. Well, time to go back to Firelink Shrine. Back at the shrine, we get good levels in the health, stamina, and strength, and then we go ahead and get Yoel's 5 free levels. And then, like a complete dumbass, I head over to the Road of Sacrifices, completely forgetting about the tree I was supposed to turn into firewood. Oh well, I'll come back to it. And while fighting these human bat-like creatures, one of them drops the extremely rare Great Corvian Scythe. I was pretty surprised and a little bit annoyed because I've been trying to find this scythe for my other characters and I could never find it. But maybe I can do a scythe-only run on New Game Plus with this character. Let me know if y'all want that. Now usually I'll make my way over to the Cathedral of the Deep before heading down here to Farron Keep, but this time I decided to come to Farron Keep first, because there's a few things here I want to collect that'll make me a lot stronger. We soon grab the Dream Chaser's Ashes, which allows us to buy infinite Titanite shards. And then I get challenged by this demon to see who has the better bonk stick. Now this demon put up a pretty strong fight, and he got a few good bonks on me, but at the end, it was me who had the better bonk stick. Hell yeah. We take a quick pit stop to grab some large Titanite shards, and then grab a heavy gem, which once infused with a weapon of our choice, it'll have that weapon scale better with strength. We then grab the Farron Coal, which will allow us to infuse our weapons with a heavy gem. Then back at Firelink Shrine, we upgrade our large club to +2 and our reinforced club to +1. Now the reinforced club does bleed damage, which is going to be helpful later, and even though I haven't infused my large club with a heavy gem yet, I will later in this run. And after leveling up our health and strength a few times, it was time to take on the Abyss Watchers. And with my large club up to +2, I was feeling pretty confident about this. Until that happened. Ouch. Our second try goes a lot better, and I was pretty impressed about how much damage we were doing to the Abyss Watchers. A few satisfying hits later, and we get the Abyss Watchers down to phase 2. Now it was a pretty close call, but after a few hefty bonks, the Abyss Watchers go down. We then haul ass to the Catacombs of Karthus, collecting some materials that'll come in handy later. We go through this not so invisible wall to grab the Grave Warden's ashes, which allows us to buy an infinite amount of Karthus Roge. And then it was time to face High Lord Wolnir. And it only took 3 good hits on this bracelet to take it down. Now usually that bracelet is the hardest one to take down, so I was feeling pretty good about this fight. And not long after the fight began, Wolnir falls back down to the Abyss. After defeating Wolnir, we head back over to Firelink Shrine where we sell all the souls that we've collected on our journey so far. And then we level up our health, stamina, and strength. We then get our large club up to +4. And then it was time for the long-awaited rematch with the Cursed Rite of Greatwood. And with our club up to +4, we are doing an insane amount of damage, and we are able to 1 or 2 tap most of the weak points on the tree. And after 1 or 2 powerful bonks, the tree goes into phase 2. And not too long after phase 2 begins, we're able to collect our firewood. We then hightail it back over to the Crucifixion Woods, where I'll grab an Ember and another Estus Shard. And then it was time for the Crystal Sage to meet the Bonkinator. Because the Crystal Sage is weak to fire, we throw some of that on our Bonk stick, and damn, that damage is crazy. Our damage is in fact so crazy that we're able to get the Crystal Sage down to less than half health before phase 2. It got a little chaotic towards the end of the fight, but soon the Crystal Sage falls. I am so amazed about how much damage we're doing. We move on from the Crystal Sage and we soon find ourselves in the Cathedral of the Deep. We take out this Ice Lizard for a good amount of souls and a Titanite scale that'll come in handy later. Then, once we actually enter the cathedral, we pick up Lloyd's Sword Ring, which increases our damage when our health is full. And then we fight off an invader who's trying to F up our run. And then it was time to face the hardest boss in the whole game, the Deacons of the Deep. Now once we get into phase 2, I turn all my attention to the Pope. Now usually I find it a lot easier to just constantly backstab the Pope until he dies, but I realized pretty quickly that our backstabs weren't doing a great amount of damage, so I decided just to go full Cave Woman mode and bonk him repeatedly until he falls. Yep, that did the trick. After grabbing some of the Pope's clothes, we head over to Firelink Shrine to celebrate me taking down the hardest boss on my first try. I throw most of my levels into strength, plus 1 or 2 levels of vitality, just because. And then we backtrack to the Catacombs of Karthus, because not only are there a few enemies down here that give a lot of souls, but there's a ton of large Titanite shards down here as well. We bonk this demon into oblivion, and not only does he give us a good amount of souls, but we can trade in his soul to get another hammer that we can use later in this run. We make our way deeper into the catacombs, and we eventually stumble upon the smoldering lake, and there's a lot of large titanite shards here. As we traverse through the smoldering lake, we pick up the Shield of Want, which also increases the souls we get per kill, and it also stacks with the Silver Serpent Ring, which is pretty cool. We grab one more large titanite shard, and then it was time to face the old Demon King. And because the old Demon King is comedically weak to dark damage, we throw some of that on our big bonk stick, and the fight begins. And we were doing a pretty good amount of damage. Now, to be honest, this fight is pretty easy, and with a few heavy bonks from our club, the old Demon King goes down. We head back to Firelink Shrine, and we trade in the old Demon King's soul for the old King's Great Hammer. It does a pretty good amount of physical damage and a pretty decent amount of fire damage too. With the amount of large titanite shards we get from the Smoldering Lake, we're able to get our large club to +5, and we get the old King's Hammer to +2. And then I decided it was time to face a dancer, because once we beat her, we're able to go to areas that not only have a lot of titanite chunks and a lot of titanite scales, but we're also able to take out 1 or 2 optional bosses that'll give us a lot of souls. Now I'm gonna shut up here, and I'm gonna let this fight play out with the dancer's theme playing in the back instead of this other background music, because the dancer theme, oh my god, it's so good. It's so good. After that beautiful boss fight, we make it to the Consumed King's Garden, where we pick up an Estus Shard, a Titanite chunk, and a Dark Gem, which apparently these guys did not want me to steal because they absolutely destroyed me. After that fiasco, it was time to face Osiris, the Consumed King. Now, I was a little bit worried about this fight, because not only is Osiris extremely tanky, but his second phase is pretty crazy. He goes pretty bonkers in his second phase. And our damage isn't looking super great either. This will probably take me a few tries. This is the attack that worries me the most in phase 2. Because even though you can like clearly see him coming at you when you're like a decent bit away from him, if you're like up close to him like you are for like 95% of this fight, that absolutely will take you out if you're not being extremely careful. But thankfully, we're able to get a stagger on Osiris at the last second, and we finish off this boss fight with a beautiful repost. Once the Consumed King is defeated, we infiltrate his lair, and we grab this gesture that will come in handy later. We then grab a few Titanite scales, and then we enter the unattended graves. While we're here, we battle some more crystal lizards that will drop us Titanite scales. With a few more Titanite scales added to my collection, it was time to face one of my favorite bosses in this game, Champion Gundyr. A few bonks later, we get Champion Gundyr down to phase 2, and I'm able to hit this beautiful parry. Now Champion Gundyr did put up a good fight, but unfortunately he didn't realize that I was the champion of parrying. In a few minutes of some very satisfying parries later, the champion falls. Before we head back to Firelink Shrine, we pick up the Hornet Ring, which increases our critical attack damage. Once we return to Firelink Shrine, we sell the souls that we collected on our journey. And with a whopping 200,000 souls, we get some levels into strength, health, and stamina. We then upgrade our large club to +8, and before I head over to Irithiel Valley, I want to get this club to max level. So we travel over to the Dragon Barracks to pick up our usual supply of Titanite chunks and other materials that will help us. And then we travel to a winter wonderland where we pick up our Titanite slab. And don't worry, we'll be here later. And once we travel back to Firelink Shrine, we get our large club up to +10. And then we infuse it with a heavy gem, making the scaling on the club go from a B scaling to an A scaling in strength. And then we arrive at the beautiful Irithiel Valley. Now I was super excited to try out my fully upgraded club on an enemy, and what's a better test subject than this dog? Damn, we are crazy overpowered. As we make our way towards Irithiel Valley, we pick up a blood gem that we will infuse with our reinforced club so it will do extra bleed damage. We arrive at Irithiel Dungeon, and after becoming the Queen Bonkinator, we take out another invader who's trying to take that title away from us. We then get the chance to meet the legendary character that everybody knows and loves, Sullivan. Anyway, a little later down the line we grab an Estus shard, and then we run into Sullivan's neighbors and we steal the profane coal from them. They weren't too happy about that, but thankfully I was able to escape. With this profaned coal, we'll be able to infuse our weapons with bleed. And then it was time to take on Yorm the Giant. And because I'm not allowed to use the Storm Ruler, I was in for a long ride. But with the power of editing, Yorm disappears. Don't worry, you guys didn't miss anything. That fight with Yorm was the slowest, most boring Yorm fight I've ever had. So, you guys missed nothing. It's okay. We head back over to Firelink Shrine and we sell all the souls that we had collected. We then get some levels into health and stamina, and then we make our way back to Irithiel Valley. And before we face Pontiff, we enter this absolutely gorgeous room because there's something here that I want to pick up. The ultimate bonking weapon of Dark Souls 3, Smo's Great Hammer. And even though this hammer isn't upgraded, it still does an insane amount of damage. And then it was time to face another one of my favorite bosses in this whole game, Pontiff Sullivan. Holy crap, that damage is crazy. Unfortunately, Pontiff and his clone really did not want me to beat them on my first try, and so they absolutely destroyed me. Unfortunately for Pontiff, for this attempt I equipped Flynn's Ring, and that, combined with the Hornet Ring and Lloyd's Sword Ring, we do an insane amount of damage. And after a follow-up heavy attack, Pontiff goes into phase 2. And while Pontiff is summoning another clone, we get the perfect opening and we get the final bonk on him, taking him down. We then travel over to Anor Londo, and after picking up an Estus shard, it was time to face Aldridge. And since Aldridge is weak to fire, it was time to wield the Old King's Hammer once more. And our damage was looking pretty good. And since the human part of Aldridge is a lot weaker than the other part of Aldridge, hitting him in the body does a lot more damage. Damn, like a lot more damage. And as Aldridge is getting ready to fire a barrage of bows at me, we get the last bonk on him and we take him out. And we immediately head back to the Dragon Barracks to face Dragon Slayer armor. We bonked the Dragon Slayer armor so hard that we're able to get a stagger on him, and it was really satisfying seeing those big damage numbers. And a few very powerful bonks later, the Dragon Slayer armor falls. We then take a quick pit stop to Firelink Shrine, where we get the Old King's Hammer up to +4. And before we head over to the Grand Archives, there's one more place that I want to travel to. Welcome everybody to Archdragon Peak. Now the reason why I traveled here is because not only is there a lot of good materials here, but there's also an incredible boss here that I want to fight. During my shopping spree, this dragon was constantly trying to turn me into barbecue, so we do a quick plunge attack and we take him out. After taking him down, we disappear and reappear at another part of the Archdragon Peak. As I continued making it through this land, I had a very close call with this dragon. Whew. And after perfectly dodging past all of these stone creatures, our shopping spree continues. We soon grab the Dragon Chaser's ashes, which allows us to buy an infinite amount of whatever Titanite piece that we need. And then before we take on the boss of this area, there's one more weapon that I want to collect. But in order to get that weapon, I have to duke it out with this man covered in stone armor. A few minutes of trading bonks with each other, we finally take him down and we get the Dragon Tooth, which is pretty freaking cool. And then we pull this lever, which not only causes this big bell to ring, but it also summons a heavy storm. And then it was time to take on the Nameless King. While the dragon is breathing fire, we're able to get a big bonk in, doing a significant amount of damage. With another big bonk, we're able to stagger the dragon, and after hitting the critical attack, we get the Nameless King down to phase 2. At the beginning of this phase, I made sure to switch out Smo's Great Hammer for the Old King's Great Hammer, because the Nameless King is weak to fire. And we are doing some pretty solid damage. And just a few hits later, we're actually able to stagger the Nameless King. And then during phase 2, to my shock, we're able to stagger the Nameless King again. Damn. And just like that, the Nameless King falls to the Bonkinator. After the storm stops, we pick up a Titanite slab, and before we head back to Firelink Shrine, we pick up the Lightning Clutch Ring, which increases our lightning damage, but it also makes us take more damage in return. Once we're back at Firelink Shrine, we sell all the souls that we collected at Archdragon Peak. And once we get a few good levels into health, endurance, and strength, we buy some Titanite chunks and some Twinkling Titanite so we can get Smo's Great Hammer up to +4. And then we travel to the Grand Archives. And after a few minutes of grabbing some really good upgrade materials, it was time to face the twin princes. And since Lorian is extremely weak to lightning damage, a few bonks later we get him to phase 2. We get Lorian down, and then while Lothric is trying to resurrect him, we hit him with a few powerful bonks, and they go down. And once we return to Firelink Shrine, we get a few more levels of strength, plus an extra level of health, and then it was time for the Bonkinator to face her final challenge, the Soul Cinder. A few minutes of some intense fighting later, we get the Soul Cinder down to phase 2. It was a tense fight, but soon the Bonkinator takes down the Soul Cinder. And that concludes our Bonk only run in Dark Souls 3. Thank you everybody so much for watching this video. This was such a blast to get footage for and edit and record my commentary over. I had a really fun time with this challenge run, and I know these aren't really like challenging challenge runs, but I still think it was a blast to work on, and the Bonkinator will return in the DLC, so there will be another video of the DLC that will come out at some point. There are a few runs that I want to get to before coming back to the Bonkinator, but she will return. And again, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I will see you guys in the next one. Thank you.